Welcome to the Start Well podcast. I'm Dawn Thomas, your host. As a mother, financial advisor, and researcher, I know the importance of empowering young people on their financial journeys. Whether you're a parent, grandparent, or the coolest aunt or uncle, join me in exploring how impactful conversations about money can shape a young person's future. Let's harness their superpower of time and your superpower of influence to ensure they start well and continue to live well into the future. The information discussed in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into account your personal and financial objectives and situation. Before acting on any information discussed here, you should consider its appropriateness, having regard to your objectives, needs, and financial position. Today on the Start Well episode, we are diving into a book that quietly challenges almost everything we think we know about work, money, and aging. The 100-Year Life, Living and Working in an Age of Longevity by Lynda, Gratton, and Andrew Scott asks a big question. What happens when living to 100 is no longer extraordinary but expected? To help us unpack what this really means for young people, parents, and families, I'm so happy to be reconnected with my regular book reviewer, principal, advisor, based in New South Wales, Michelle Flanagan, who's taken a deep dive into this book and will help us turn these big ideas into conversations we can actually have at home. Welcome, Michelle.
Thanks, Dawn. Good to be back. 2026 going to be a big year.
I told you I didn't want to talk to you too much about this book, but I felt a sense of, why did Michelle do this to me? Because I felt, now that I know the stats, my first sense reading this book was that I panicked. What was your initial feeling engaging with this book?
Yeah, I think I kept going round in circles all the way through the book. And I kept thinking about all these people who need to read this. And then I'm like, oh, this is exhausting. And then I'm like, is this really going to happen? So it was mind blowing. And then I was also just trying to apply it to myself, which is what the book is designed to do, is to get you in the end thinking about it. I don't think it does that very well. Perhaps it doesn't give you exercises to do or that kind of thing. So maybe there's a part 2 for the authors of this book to come through with a bit more of that. But it certainly did give me a lot to think about.
Yes, a lot. I that's the thing, a lot. I felt that life has changed for me reading that book.
Wow.
Like, it's that significant going, why have I not just looked at it this way? It made me question everything from the conversations I'm having with my kids, which I do tell them the world is changing, but not to the extent of what this book actually talks about. It makes me question the conversations I'm having as an advisor, because we are still using stats like the retirement standard that take life expectancy into 82 and 85. It gave me a personal crisis about my own retirement planning. So I understand that feeling that you said you went round and round. And I just went, why, Michelle? Why did you do this to me? But also, I'm really thankful. So on the theme of this book, I think it's talking about seeing longevity. You could either see it as a problem, or you can see it as a gift.
Maybe you will change next week, next month, next year. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I've always felt as a Gen Xer that we're in the middle of this baby boomers and the Gen Ys and the millennials, and that we kind of got all the problems. The Ys and the millennials also feel like they've got all the problems as well. So I think it's a good reminder to embrace life and also try and steer your own life in the way that you want it. And it really reminded me that we're all not the same and that it's okay to be a little different. And I'm not sure, are we going to pave the way as our generation? Or I think certainly younger generations, if I think my nieces, my stepchildren and your children, like these are the people who are going to change the way. But there are the young people in the workforce, as we know today, people, even if we think about post-COVID, how what they want or how they even started into the workforce, and now what their new normal is a little different from what you and I experience as well.
You were raised by people who believe in the three-stage approach. And we'll get to what three-stage means. We'll get to that. And I just went, yes, that's me. And I feel like in our age range, we're kind of stuck in the middle of this transition because now we've been given this amazing new information that should be a gift. But initially, it's just feeling a bit overwhelming in terms of replanning for the future.
I also think we all have clients too who, the world says you should retire by 65. And the world says, oh, if you retire by 60, that's amazing. And if you're a government worker, you get to retire at 55, and that's even more amazing. But, that definitely is defined benefit plans as dying out. It's okay to continue to work because and I think this book challenges the transitioning and the finding the joy all the time in what you want to do and then staying working because it gives you purpose as well.
Yeah. So longevity as a gift and its implication. The book opens up with some striking statistics. A child born today in the West has over 50% chance of living past 105, whereas a child born 100 years ago had less than 1% chance. How did these numbers strike you, Michelle?
Yeah, hugely. But it made me reflect and going, how many people do you know who are now living late 80s, early 90s? Like that is more common, and I think even if I reflect on my clients, and I've got some older clients who they still seem quite sprightly to me in their mid to late 80s. My parents, I want them around forever, but I know that's not possible. But, so I think I hadn't really thought about how we are aging in that way, but I think our life expectancy tables still sit around this 84, but I guess they're just an expectancy. They're just a statistic. There is a lot more people who live beyond that.
And this book, I don't think I'm even going to ask the silly question of, would you recommend it?
To my stepdaughter, I said, I think you need to read this book, but not yet. I think she's got to get through uni and living. I don't want to be the killjoy. What I want is her to use it to leverage and to understand a little bit more. I think certainly, it could be a load as well, is what I don't want that to be. Like if you were reading it as a young person, would you go, oh my God, this just, is this a curse or is it a gift? But it could help her reframe them. I'm not sure. What do you think? You've got kids. Like, if you ask your eldest to read it, is he too young to read it? Like,
I'm not proud to say this, but I used it in my nagging of him yesterday as I was scolding him about something or other. I did tell him about his ability to resist change. And I said, do you know that you're going to be living past 100? And you have to learn to adapt. You have to evolve. You have to recreate, redefine who you are. And that starts on now. I said, you need to do this because the more you're staying in this little bubble right now and you're not wanting change, I think the theme of what's happening here is that you're going to have stages where you're going to be the creator and you're going to evolve. And life changes a bit.
I think you're also saying that to a young boy, and we know them, like their minds don't necessarily develop as quickly. So I feel like that's the only thing. I'm like, it could be a load, as well as some kids could embrace it. You're going to have those kids who are going to go, oh, wow, and this is going to give them some really good food for thought. And I think you're going to have kids who it's a bit overwhelming as well.
Don't worry, he dismissed me straight away. He said, oh, Mama, you just always listen to these podcasts and read those books. And that's it. Conversation ended there. So I don't think I got through to him, but we will have take two of when I asked him to read that book because I did think it's a good book.
But it mind blows me. Your kids, my nieces, nephews, stepkids, they are all going to live or possibly live to that age. And that's the part now, like, when you say to a kid, you could live to 100, they'll be like, wow. And because that just is so old to them, like perspective on saying that to someone who's 12 or something.
Correct. And I think the book also points that out, that it's saying that our perception, one of the difficulties we know as advisors as well, is that people find it very hard to plan for their future selves because they're not there yet. We also know that's why there's disengagement with super. But people have this perception that living longer in an older phase means being frail, being unhealthy, not having independence. And I think the book challenges that perception of what our future selves could be.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. I think it's also redefining, like we could be working till we're 70. I don't think I want to work that long, but I guess it's becoming more common that people do stay on. Like even if I look at people within our industry, there's many people who stay because they enjoy it. And if you shape your life around reducing number of days that you're getting to work, those things, then maybe there's the possibility that you can. There's a long way to go too. Like, and the book highlights that.
Yes. It's
And
about rethinking those concepts of work, retirement, and money.
mm,
And it highlights that working longer may become necessary. Retirement at 65 may be unrealistic, and many may need to work into their 70s or 80s. I suppose if we're kind of looking at the young people that you have around you and the older concepts of retirement, and I feel like they're already in that phase of redefining what retirement means. What do you think young people understand about this right now?
it depends how young we go. So I think if we're talking about 35, 40-year-olds, I think they understand that they've always had compulsory super and that they will generally be okay. But I think young people just disconnect with it because it's so far out into the future that they just cannot and don't want to think about that. And as you said earlier, like it means they're getting really old and they associate that with frail versus perhaps associating it with choice and a bit more freedom and elements like that. I think kids don't grasp perhaps how much needs to be done to think about these things, but then that steals them of that innocence as well.
I don't think they're going
Right.
to have the same worry that we have, or not worry, maybe a different perspective, because the book also says that, for example, the things that astound us with the way technology is going is
Yeah.
things that they accept is their regular world.
That's
Yeah.
right. So, and I think what it gave me the perspective too that whilst I think probably, say, people in their mid 20s should be starting to think about the next steps, maybe they don't have to be yet, Don. Maybe that's okay as well. And so the world before them, the generations before them also have to change their expectations of what these people and where they need to be at in their lives. Because ultimately, if they're going to live longer, then they've got more time to do all those other things as well. And so
Yeah.
do they need to, and we also see it because banks now, and especially in the US and things like that, they're offering like 40-year term loans, and you think that's ridiculous. But then you put it in the context of living a longer life, then isn't that ridiculous? Because financially, you've got to be able to stop, start, and do all of these things like we'll go through in the book about maybe re-engineering yourself at some point, reskilling yourself, changing direction and that being okay. But how do you have the financial means then to do that? And so certainly institutions, governments, there's a huge amount for everybody to think about here. I was reading it thinking I must ask a politician what they think because I feel like sometimes in that world, and this is what young people do worry about this stuff, is that it's very short-sighted, a lot of it, because it's about winning a vote and, how do we plan for the future? How does the world operate in the future?
Look, it's starting actually with us because it does move towards the end of the book about governments and corporates having to plan around this. But the book is not just about money when it's planning for a 100-year life. It's about you need good health, strong skills, and relationships, and this will help you actually enjoy the longevity you have. So it's actually talking about, like I said, that balance, right? With how do you think, with knowing the young people in your life, how do you frame that conversation at home around the importance of good relationships and you know money lessons and everything?
Talking with
Yeah.
my partner about this and just saying, this book is talking about how choosing the right partner where we can balance each other out at the right times. And that we know in relationships, it's not about equal all the time, but it's about how we make that a partnership balancing, and if I look at my parents and I feel like they've done that reasonably well, although it's been a very traditional style of relationship. Dad's worked, mum's helped and raised 4 children, but she's done all of this head of, home operations as I like chief of home, role. But I think in partnerships now, we're seeing that. And when I said to my partner, there's times where one person might earn more and the other person less, and then the world might need to take time to reskill. So we're going to have to take time back. But I think they're conversations worth having. I think it gave me a little bit of context and framework to say, we might work through to this age. Who knows? Hopefully not. And people will be listening to me going, well, you're a financial planner. You should have it all sorted out, but I live in the same pressures. I have a house. I live in Sydney. That means property prices are really big. That means mortgages are really big. And that means sacrificing or thinking about how that plays through into my own retirement.
I can imagine someone picking up this book and also starting not a conversation only with their kids, but with their partners. Because I went to my husband and last night, probably again, maybe my timing of having conversation with my family members is not great. But I told him, I said, you're probably going to have to work till your 80s. And he didn't want to hear it. I should have given him more context. But I suppose I just blurted it out as I did because my mind was just like overwhelmed.
He went, how do I continue to do all of this, raise children? And it's like, well, you're not going to be raising children. Our mortgage won't be as high. You might only work 3 days a week and you might actually enjoy that. And, and I say that too with the context of, yesterday I had a client meeting and someone's fully retired and they're above all meeting their, conditions of release of super and all of that, but they work because they enjoy it and they can still add value. And I think that comes back to the context of the book. Those, we talk about tangible assets and intangible assets, so the book talks about those things. And I think that's really filling his intangible asset bucket. And that I think is key because you stay healthy in mind, which is another part of the book.
Yeah.
And therefore you can see some real benefits of it. Because so many people, like, how do they know what to, that's one of the things of retirement is, what are you going to do when you do retire? Like, how are you shifting from being a full-time go to an office or worker and shift to whatever it is that you do next?
Yeah, it's making me think about the conversations with my current retirees who are in their 70s and 80s are still kind of relevant to the old ways. They are going to be supported by the age pension payments, things like that were promised to them early on, right?
They're going to be grandfathered. They're not going to be impacted in that way.
It's more like people our age and younger that have to really think differently because the way it's set up now, the book kind of notes that around the world, governments haven't caught up, financial systems haven't caught up. So it does, while we can't really wait for the government to sort it out for us, I think where there's financial apathy, we're kind of waiting for that to roll through. This is more about expanding maybe our perception of what the future could be like.
Yeah. And I guess it's thinking about life in, not that you want to put it into time zones, but, in the next 5 years, what do I want for myself in the next 10? And as I always say to clients, it's absolutely okay that our objectives change. That's life and we're human, right? And what we want changes. Our circumstances change, our experiences change. And so that is going to change what we want to achieve. But if we are at least going for the next 5 years, I think I want to just be having fun and experiencing life and gaining lots of skill. And that's okay. But then in the following 5 years after that, I think I'm going to want to knuckle down and be saving and doing that. It was the big thing of reskilling. I've never thought of myself as having a second kind of completely different career. And I think that's because I'm an ex, I'm a little bit more older than you. Like it's just not something that's been really put into my head to think about having another career. For me, it probably really just had this very streamlined career. So I think then if you want to do that, if you see yourself, zigging into agging in life, you've got to be then saving. And that's not just putting super in the picture, that's putting outside of super because we know we can't access super till we get to an older age. And under this 100-year life, our condition of release is no one's going to be fully retired by 60. So you have to get to 65 before you can even touch this bucket, right? And then I'm like, my head's going, wow, all the strategies you could be doing at 65, 70, 75, but again, we hit limits because we get to 75, and then so every single limit that we know as rules in the super system, they will need to be adjusted over time. Thank God, like, Division 296 has come through, and we're now going to be indexing that $3 million cap because it is all of our start well people who would be impacted significantly by that.
Yeah, there's just so much to think about regarding how the future actually ends up in phases and the transitions. I think what you're talking about is transitioning to it and recalibrating, because they have pointed out in the book that we know that jobs will disappear, but we don't know what jobs are going to be created. But multi-stage life and exploration, right? So we talked about three-stage life at the start of the podcast. And three-stage life is what we know of: the studying period, the employment period, and the retirement period. Now, what they are looking at, in this book is that you have multiple stages of life and exploration. So, for example, exploration stages can happen in multiple points in life, from your 18 to 30s, mid 40s, and 70s to 80s. And I really saw that, and I'm like, wow, there's a hope. So if I miss my mid 40s exploration phase, I can circle back to it in my 70s, 80s. Um, like, how do you think young people can plan for periods of exploration without compromising future security?
I think we have to be saving a little bit. We have to be, investing some of that money, tucking some money away. A really simple, you and I love it, dollar cost average approach to just, start with some money today. I talk about it all the time, don't I? Compounding. What we start today and a little bit away is actually going to provide us really great options to have a year off and reskill or do that recreation aspect that the book talks about to explore and have that transition period and know that you're going to be okay and that you can do it. I think that's really cool as well. And then if you don't end up doing it, then do something else with that money. But that money will be there then for you as well. So I think it's certainly, whilst this is a podcast about, we're about starting well and linking it back to finances, it certainly highlights that having a little bit. Now, we're not talking that you need 100,000 or 200,000. It might be that you need a year's worth of expenses plus, so working out what that is. Now, for some people, that could be 100,000 because you've got kids and family. But if you're a partnered up, double income, no kid family, and you haven't started that yet, it's getting you to do a bit of saving. And it would be no different to what a young couple does perhaps before they start to have a family, where they go, okay, we need to start saving because we're going to go down to one income here and then we're going to come back again. And it's, I think, thinking about the world and your life in that little approach to give yourself that opportunity to reskill to do those things. And, the experiences can include traveling to gain that experience and exposure as well. We know that traveling opens our minds and, you feel the better for it. And that's the joy as well. It's not saying don't do something that you don't love, but you're going to need, unfortunately, a lot of it I think, that exploration phase will require you to have some money behind you to do that.
So I think important in this conversation as well is that I think we've been taught that life is very linear in our planning. But for younger people, it's understanding that it's going to have all these curves. You're moving forward eventually, but there's going to be twists and turns, and is being able to adapt to whatever the new world throws at us, because we don't know entirely what that new state would be. But there are things you can control, which is your ability to, recreate, adapt your health, your relationships. So having people who are very adaptable as well and positive. I think that's what they talked about, having the right people around you.
It's a huge part because all of a sudden, being a child is such a small component of your life. And then perhaps even the working part becomes longer, but the people in it become, even if your parents, your children are only at home for such a short period of time, really in the context of your part, and therefore friendship circles become really important as well. Friendship and family, I put them all into the one kind of bucket, but it certainly shows you how it does become important. But it also concerned me from a what if you're not? Like, there was this kind of emphasis in the book about, and it made these assumptions these people were always married. So what if you're not married? And, my friends and I used to joke that, well, when we get old, we'll just all like live in a little, 4-bedroom unit block and hire a nurse to look after us. And I'm like, it certainly shows you how community living might change and all of these like there's so much change ahead of us in how we just live and enjoy life.
They do talk a lot about being in a partnership. I think they did pause at one point and say that, okay, if they use the case studies, this book uses case studies, not case studies, they use example of you've got Jimmy, you've got Jane, you might have another one in there, but you're tracking them through scenarios. And he did talk about, oh yeah, we assume that Jane is going to be staying with the same partner over that time, but she may not, but statistically as well, that's the case. I think it is, again, reflecting back to that point of the importance of people in your life. And you're saying it could just look like more than a form of being in a partnership with someone. You could be looking at, that kind of communal living with a group of people that have the same shared interests, values.
And that's no different to what you get when you're in a partnership, like with somebody. And that then gives you more freedom. But I think that's also, it's hard, isn't it? Because you don't have that in your friendship circle normally. And the monetary aspect of the friendship circle is not in that component. So I think that's probably the biggest challenging part of that. And also then is what happens if life changes. But I guess people can get divorced, people can move on and find someone to marry. It's a complexity that you just have to navigate. I think if you've got 100 years ahead of you and not, a 20-year-old today doesn't have 100, they've got 80 years ahead of them, so to speak, then you need to be thinking about giving some thought to it, not just cruising along forever. Or, it could be a little too late. I think it just actually accentuates how, and we don't have all the solutions because, what are you investing in? That's what people want to know. Then where do I invest my money? And that then requires advice. And we know our advice industry is not equipped for that, right? To give that small piece of advice to help that. And I think that's, I was thinking about this and going, we really need to go back to our industry body, the FAAA, and there could be just so much they do with a topic like this.
I'm so glad that you suggested this book. And I read a lot of finance books because, the purposes of start well, I do have to read them. But this really rocked my belief. And I just felt like, when that sense when you feel like you've been sleepwalking because you've just been going through it, and even though I'm so engaged with material about different things and I'm reading into research, this has been like a slap in the face. It's just like, reality, wake up, Dawn, wake up to reality.
That's amazing because I didn't choose it for that. I just chose it because I thought that sounds like an interesting book to read and wrap your head around. And it certainly has been a great eye-opener, I think, for me. And I think that's why I would say to people is read it, because I like all books, read it, take 2 things out of it and put it back over there in that pile kind of thing. But it really opened up we got a lot to do. And perhaps we need to think about shifting the conversation with younger people and adding this into the element. Like, statistically, you could live longer. So what does that mean? And, it wouldn't, as my stepdaughter said, she goes, I want to retire now.
Look, it's okay. You're in an exploration stage because you're trying to define what works for you. And then by 30, we hope that the exploration stage has ended. But I think it's giving permission at this point to be able to look at those things. And the book also does acknowledge that younger people have caught on quicker than probably we have, that life is about understanding, the experiences and what you want out of it.
Yes, they certainly are better at it. And and again, that comes back to what generation you are. And that is another point of the book, is to not put you in age groups, but to put you in stage groups. I think even as a society, we don't probably have a lot to do with people who are not in our age group. And life is like that. Like you would be like you're having a family and you're going to school events, and therefore that puts you in the world of people who are doing exactly the same thing, their children and school events. And, touched on how many things do we do in life that actually puts us into something that has a great deal, like a vast amount of people of different ages to bring different perspectives, different experiences, different needs and wants in that equation. And there aren't that many groups that you then would be a part of. And it even makes me think differently about, your own industry, or like that probably is industry events is a really good way where you see people of all age groups in that thing. The book touches on perhaps like church or those types of social gatherings of some form where you do get lots of people as well. And then what else is there? Like maybe sports, because lots of sport as we start and we grow up is all about under this age or under that age, or, like it puts you into age groups still. And then, the eliteness of it means you're only a certain age.
Yeah, it's talking about mingling, right, of ages. They might be making friends with younger people in the exploration stage, and that's quite exciting.
Could be all at doing some form of study together. And so when you're later on in your 30s or 40s and you're studying, that doesn't mean you're going to be studying with people who are only in their 30s.
Yes.
Like you could be studying with the person who's finished off their traditional career and recreating themselves and reskilling to have another 10 years of working, because that's what they're seeking.
Well, Michelle, I'm so glad you brought this book to our attention. And I don't think it's one of those books that I don't think people return to it because it's not like a point 1, 2, and 3 of how you do your everyday finance. It's about the idea and sparking a change of looking at things. So with that in mind, I'm going to leave you with one thing that the book makes clear that we can take back to parents is around the higher success of making good financial decisions comes down to experience. So young people experiencing how to make good financial decisions. So as we close off this episode, what would be your suggestions to adults that have young people around them about how they can build this experience of financial decisions?
Set some little mini goals, and it's goals that are real, perhaps that SMART goal measure, you know, and that they're more realistic to kids and they're in line with what kids want. So it comes back to even basic things like if a child says, I want this, well, then how are you going to do that? So coming back to pocket money, saving some of that pocket money and working towards that goal, maybe matching some of the savings, so that they can achieve that goal and that they then are working towards a goal. So setting a goal, doing an action point for it and working towards it, and then being rewarded for it and the enjoyment. And then if there's a skill, and that's this, we've talked about this all the time, is the basic set of starting to do some form of little investing. And even if it is just in a bank account, make sure the bank account's earning good interest and getting, 4.5%, 5% if possible. So then you're getting rewarded for that, and then reflecting on that interest earned so that then they can see the gain and the momentum of that. And we know it's harder to see, but if the context is only I've got to get to $200 because I want to buy this, then that's easier and that's more realistic. And then as we get bigger and we dream bigger, then, the savings or the goals have to be bigger. And I think parents have to demonstrate to their kids this kind of thing as well. Like, so we do want to go, like maybe it is that we want to go away overseas. So what are we doing to save for that? Like, let's not go do that. Let's put that in that bank account, and perhaps maybe being a bit more open. I don't know. Finance is always one of those things. Like, do you talk about finance with your kids? Do you ever show them the bank balance? Or, it's a really hard thing because they've got no context either of of what things cost a lot of the time. I think getting kids involved in, if we've got an allocation of money that we want to go on our next holiday, then getting them to go online and find the accommodation, or getting them to go online and find the flights so they can understand, okay, if we spend that much on flights, we've only got this much left to spend on accommodation and the other experiences once we actually physically get to the location we're going to. So I think they're good experiences for kids to go through, because then you think about that in their 25s and their 35s, then they've got that skill set of budgeting at play.
It's the simplest things that they can be involved in, because money decisions happen all around us. And my new experience was a car boot sale that I did about a week ago. And I felt that just doing that, even if you don't make any money, if you're going to be cleaning out your house anyway, like cleaning out your house and selling stuff, that's also a side hustle. So that's legit. An experience like that opened up so many conversations with the kids around itemizing, pricing, like how people shop, economic theories of how price is determined. And I didn't set out doing an experience for that purpose, but I think we may not as parents set it out to do that quite intentionally. But when the opportunity presents itself, is to think about how.
And I think for parents, don't just do it for your kids, because they don't get the experience on the way through. I think that's the biggest challenge, is if you've got to get them the experience. And it's ultimately for us, we want to attach it to some kind of monetary aspect that's going to give a intangible reward, is probably a better way to say it.
Well, Michelle, I am thankful for you. And at the same time, I also resent you a little bit because I'm really tired from all the thinking I've had to do. It was a great book suggestion, Michelle. And there is no doubt you should be reading this book. No doubt at all. You should spread the message far and wide to read this book. And Michelle, I'll be looking forward to the next book that you bring to the podcast. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Dawn. It's been great to be back.
In the spirit of reconciliation, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Start Well and investing in the financial empowerment of young people. Please refer to the show notes for resources and links discussed in this episode. Subscribe now to get notified of the latest episodes as they drop weekly. And visit us on the Wealth Designer Start Well page for further resources to continue your knowledge journey.